So today I'm going to analyze the poem Thetis by Carol and Duffy. First, I'm going to label the lines and the stanzas. So there are 48 lines and 8 stanzas in total. Each stanza has 6 lines, and we call this a sestet. So the background of Thetis' poem is from Greek mythology. The protagonist, Thetis, is a Greek sea nymph, which is the sea goddess, and she is told by the sea god Proteus that she's going to bear a baby who will be stronger than his father and then die. So Jupiter is scared of this, so he leaves Thetis. And then he ordered his grandson, Peleus, to chase after Thetis and to marry her. So Thetis is transforming to many shapes in order to avoid Peleus, but he finally got her and they're married. So the poem basically is based on this Greek mythology that Thetis is avoiding Peleus to marry and by changing into different forms. So I'm going to analyze the poem stanza by stanza, line by line. So in the first stanza, it says, I shrunk myself to the size of a bird in the hand of a man. Sweet, sweet was the small song that I sang, till I felt the squeeze of his fist. So the starting looks like it happens in the middle of a story and a conversation. It is called in media res. And it is speaking in the first person's perspective. This I represents Thetis. It's like she herself is telling a story to someone about what she encountered and experienced. So this is called a dramatic monologue. So in the first stanza, it says, I shrank into a bird. So this bird is the first thing Thetis transformed into, because she is a sea goddess and she has the ability called metamorphosis, which is being able to transform into any physical shapes. So she transformed into a bird. And in line 4, sweet, sweet was the small sound that I sang. The S sounds, the repeating S sounds, is alliteration of consonants. And this represents she is enjoying her life as a small bird. And the sweet, sweet small sound is a representation of bird sound. It represents a delightful tone. But line 6, the last line of this stanza, has a sudden shift, which says, till I felt the squeeze of his fist. So his here represents Peleus, the man chasing after Thetis. And it has a contrasting mode to the delightful tone, which is very threatening. So the first stanza represents Thetis changing into a bird, but was caught by a man in his fist, and it is a failure of her first metamorphosis. And then the second stanza, it says, then I did this, shouldered the cross of an albatross, up the hill of the sky. Why? To follow a ship, but I felt my wings clipped by the squint of a crossbow's eye. So then represents it's the second time of Thetis' metamorphosis. This time she transformed into an albatross, which is a bigger sized bird. So it says she turned into an albatross and flying in the sky. The why is a rhetorical question, which she answered in the following sentence, to follow a ship. So in my understanding, to follow a ship means she sticks to her own will. She's trying to find a way of her life to follow. But in line 11, the but is also a sudden transformation. Also a sudden transform. That her wings are clipped by the squint of a crossbow's eye. So crossbow is a weapon which can catch birds and creatures. So this is again corresponding to the first stanza, the last few sentences, which is she being stopped and being hurt, being captured. So the third stanza continues the transformation. This time she transformed into a snake. And the snake is described by the size 8. So the size 8 represents an average feminine shape size. So it has a stereotypical feminine representation. And snake is usually a threatening and dangerous creature. So this time, different from the first two stanzas, which are birds, Thetis transforms into a land animal and has a little danger. But in the next line, it says big mistake. So she is denying herself. So why it is a big mistake, it is explained in the later lines. It says coiled in my charmer's lap. So a snake coiling in someone's lap means she is feeling safe and trust. But suddenly the transition goes, I feel the grasp of his strangler's clasp. So his is again representing Peleus, who is chasing after her. And the snake is being grasped by the nape, means this seduction is killing the snake, which is fatal. And by grabbing someone at the nape means she doesn't have any voice and can't sing or speak anymore. This is again the third time failure that she tries to transform and avoid the pursuit of Peleus. And then the fourth stanza. Thetis transformed into a meat eater. This time, this transformation is getting more fierce, and she is becoming a predator herself. She is becoming wild and powerful. So she's trying to build herself up in order to avoid the pursuit and the hunt of Peleus. So it says, next I was raw claw 50 paw, jungle floor meat eater raw, a zebra score in my lower jaw. But my gold eye saw the guy in the grass with the gun 12 bore. So the gold eye is often the color of the eye of fierce animals, predators, like lions or tigers. So she is becoming aggressive herself. But in line 24, it says the guy in the grass with the gun. The guy is again the man. He has a gun, which is a killing machine, can take the life of any animal or even human. So this is again a failure of her transformation, even though she is becoming powerful and aggressive herself, but she eventually is taken down by this man. And then the fifth stanza. I sank through the floor of the earth to swim in the sea. Mermaid, me, big fish, eel, dolphin, whale, the ocean's opera singer. Over the waves the fisherman came with his hook and his line and his sinker. So this time she went back to her home, sea. And these transformations are all sea related. So she can be more free and confident in her home. She transferred into mermaid, sea nymph, big fish, eel, dolphin, whale, etc. So all these sea-related animals she transformed into are very free and confident in the environment surrounding by the sea. And in line 28 it says whale, the ocean's opera singer. But 29 and 30 line says over the way fisherman. Fisherman is again the predator, aiming for those fishes. And he got a hook and the line and the sinker, aiming to get these fishes. So I think here the fisherman is very ambitious, because even whale, like very big animal in the sea, the fisherman wants to catch. So I think it represents the aggressiveness and ambitious of man. And this time, even though it's in the sea, Thetis is home, she is eventually caught by the fisherman, and this is again a failure of her transformation. And then the sixth stanza. I changed my tune to raccoon, skunk, stoat, to weasel, ferret, bat, mink, rat. The taxidermist sharpened his knives. I smelled the stink of formaldehyde. Stuff that. So this time, Thetis transformed into raccoon, skunk, stoat, weasel, ferret, bat, mink, rat. These are all animals that are not that popular and were usually disliked by humans. And this stanza has a very negative connotation, because even though Thetis transformed into those unpopular animals, there are still taxidermists, the men, chasing after her. And finally, in line 36, stuff that has, it is a use of pun, and it conveys a contempt and disgust tone. So in stanza 7, this is another transformation, but this time the transformation is different. Thetis transformed into wind, gas, air. Different from those transformations in the previous stanzas, these transformations are figurative and formless creatures. They are non-living, and they are impossible to physically catch them. this stanza has a very urgent tone, which is she is taking any measures to avoid the hunt of Peleus, even though she is transforming into figurative creatures. So it says, I was wind, I was gas, I was all hot air, trailed clouds of for hair. I scrawled my name with a hurricane. When out of the blue roared a fighter plane. Line 40 is very significant. It says, scrawled my name with a hurricane. So Thetis is trying to write her name, and this represents she is trying to find her voice and identity. But she is losing herself. And her individuality. And in line 42, the fighter plane. A plane is able to travel through the air, and it destroys all the wind, gas, and air. And in this sense, it is able to destroy Thetis' power. So this is another failure of Metamorphosis. Even though she is formless and non-living, she is eventually taken down by a man. So the last stanza is the final ending and the resolution. It says, my tongue was flame and my kisses burned, but the groom were asbestos, so I changed, I learned, turn inside out. Or that's how it felt when the child bursts out. The tone in the last stanza is very desperate. And it has a sense of the woman being defeated. The man eventually won over the woman. So here, the tongue, the kisses, all has a sexual connotation. And then the last three sentences is most significant, which is the final metamorphosis of Thetis, which is she transformed into motherhood. Because a child has burst out. So the word choice here, using the word burst, is very violent. Because of childbirth, Thetis become a mother. And of course here the child represents Achilles in the Greek mythology. So that's like the final resolution of this poem, and it gives an ending to the poem which represents the woman being defeated and the man won, and she was forced to have a child and transfer into motherhood. So in the first stanza, the repeating S sounds are alliteration, and it has a delightful tone that Thetis enjoys being a small bird and is singing bird sound. And then the second stanza, there's a lot of rhymes with albatross, cross, ship, clip, sky, y, I. So the author makes use of every word into rhyme. The words are not useless, but they are all corresponding to each other and has a connecting theme that every time she changes into something, there's always a man chasing after her. And then the third stanza, size 8, is a very precise number, and so is 50 in the next stanza. Those precise numbers have some special meaning to describe the noun after it and to show the significance of the author's intention to represent feminine shape for the size 8 and the power for 50, the contrast between a woman's intention and her ability. And then I feel like the literary devices of imagery is constant throughout all the stanzas in this poem. Also, something worth noticing is the animals and the creatures Thetis transform into in each stanza. It is increasing in a sense in terms of level of fierce and aggressiveness and like the spread of the environment they live. Because for the first two stanzas, there are birds living in the sky, and then in the next two stanzas, it's land animals with increasing aggressiveness and fierce. And then in the following two stanzas, the first one is animals in the sea, where is Thetis' home, and they're sea-related animals. The next stanza is animals that are unpopular, and the second to last stanza is figurative creatures, formless and non-living. And then the last stanza is finally the transfer into motherhood, which is the final stage of Metamorphosis, Thetis' transformation. So I think these transformations are having a great significance in terms of Thetis' willing to change, and she already done whatever she can do to avoid the man's chase, but every time is a failure. So one of the themes in this poem is definitely transformation. It also corresponds with some characteristics of women, that they are keep changing and being flexible to adjust and adapt to the environment, and they're always trying to find their own identity and voice, but I guess it's a failure that they won't reach their goal. And then another theme is definitely criticizing men, that they can do whatever they can to reach their goal, even is to take a woman. They always chase after their goals, no matter what method they use. So it is, they're very stubborn. And they're very stubborn and persistent. And I noticed the tone shift is everywhere in this poem. I feel like for the first two stanza to the next two stanza is a tone shift, like from land animals to from sky animals to land animals. And then from the fourth stanza to the fifth stanza is a tone shift, which is from land animal to sea animal. And then it's a shift from sea animal to unpopular animal. And then from unpopular animal to non-living things. And then the final tone shift is from the stop of all the transformations and finally got into motherhood. So I think all these tone shifts are accompanied and connected through the various transformations and metamorphoses, which is one of the themes of this poem. So in terms of how to prepare the IOC for this poem, I would first start by introduction to the poem. And if possible, we can talk a little about the author as well. So in the introduction, I think we need to include that it is derived from a Greek mythology. And who is Thetis and who is Peleus. These two characters are the main characters throughout the poem, representing women and men in a larger scale. So I will definitely mention the Greek mythology background story of this poem. And I would start from the overall structure of the poem, which is sestet, 6-line stanza, and there are 8 stanzas. And I would recommend labeling the lines with numbers so that in further analysis it is really convenient to say, I noticed blah 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 in line blah blah blah, and it is good for the teacher to follow. And then I would mention that it is a dramatic monologue. It is quite easy to notice because it uses the first person's pronoun I, and it feels like the protagonist is telling a story to the readers to share her story. And it is in media res, meaning it starts as if it's in the middle of a story. And the next step, I would start analyzing this poem in order. For me personally, I like to go in a chronological order, which is from line to line. I would go stanza by stanza and analyze every line. So in this analysis, I would definitely mention literary devices. And I would include alliteration, rhymes, word choices, imagery, and besides the literary devices, I would really talk about those transformations. Like in each stanza, for example, the first two are birds, the next two are land animals, and then sea animals, unpopular animals, figurative creatures, and then finally into motherhood. I will talk about the significance of that, like it is increasing in level, and connects it to the overall theme. In the theme, I would definitely say transformation, and also the description and characteristics of both men and women. So how men and women are being portrayed and described in this poem, and also the theme of criticizing men, and how women often loses and men often win in a relationship. I mean, in terms of like chasing or taking someone down. Yeah. So I feel like those are definitely the points that I would mention in an IOC.